jeez. That was weird. My milk was like all messed up. Morning. Morning, everybody. How's everyone doing on this Saturday? Well, I hope. Yeah, me too, Renee. Me too. All right. Morning, everybody. Morning, morning, morning. Good morning. Hey, Becca. Oof. Austin is cold. I don't like it. Really? I wouldn't have expected it to be cold there. Why is it cold in Texas? That's weird, right? And it's not just me. That's weird. You have a busy day today? That's exciting. I will pretty much just be making slime today and some slime videos for those who need them. Morning, Mina. Just the airport and the plane. Oh, that makes more sense. Airports and planes do be cold. Austin, Texas, I just envision being cold. Morning, Ray. Is everyone ready to finish our book today? Today is the end of this book. 'Tis the end. It's the end of the world as we know it. It's the end of the world as we know it. Hopefully it'll get to her shortly. I did mail it, so hey, Kristen. We need to know how it ends. Yes, I just sang that at the same time with you. Yes, Mina, yes. I hate these kinds of like little tabby opening. Like I understand why they put them on, but did they hurt anyone else's hands? I know I just sound like a complainer right now, but like they just feel really hurty to me. I don't know. And they're in freaking everything now. I feel like they're all over the place. Maybe I'm just crazy. Not a good hurt, no. Not a good hurt. Does not hurt in a good way. All the weird seals hurt to open or take time, of course. Yes. Yes. That's correct. Good morning, Brittany. And I don't really understand why they have to be so difficult to open. Did anyone else go through a Sasha glitch? Did anyone else go through a Sasha glitch? Raise your hand if I glitched. Yeah, I forced myself to sleep at 1 a.m. at least for book club and make it on time. It's hot for you. Happy Pride Saturday to you, Noah. I haven't been able to make book club. Well, we're finishing the book today, so strap in. You guys, we're finishing the book today. We're finishing it today. Also, I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who's been so supportive of getting my book with the new challenge I've been doing on my other page. I've had more sales on my book this week than I have in like the last 2 months. So that's kind of amazing. Katie is sent to tell you hello from her packing bag. Oh, where's she going? That's exciting. Hello, sweetheart. I'm excited for you. Birthday slime came right on my birthday. I know I got, you know what's weird, Julia? I used the same mailing system that I've used for a really long time, but this time it gave me updates on just your package, I guess, because it was international. So it arrived yesterday, so happy belated birthday. I saw that. That was weird. But also, you know, fine. That's exciting. Going lake visiting. Anything on the water is an A+ in my book, as I was born a mermaid. I'm both happy and sad we're finishing the second book. I don't want to finish the series either, but at the same time, you know, we gotta know. We gotta know what's happening. You know what I'm saying? We just gotta know. Just gotta know. I want a swimming pool, something fierce. Come on over. We have a swimming pool. Do you like store-bought Starbucks creamer? I can't have store-bought Starbucks creamer because they do not make sugar-free, so unfortunately that is not something I have ever had the opportunity to try because they've only been making it as long as I have been sugar-free, so I cannot eat it. Are you a hot or iced coffee? Depends, Noah. It totally depends. In the morning when I'm in the house and it's cold in here, the noise is my coffee maker. I have hot coffee, but like if it's summer and I'm out and about, of course I'm a cold coffee girly because I'm not homophobic. Hi, Mom. My mom walked in right as I made. Thank you, Haley. That's so exciting. Noah gets my joke, right, Noah? You understand my joke? That was bad timing on my mom's part. She never gets my jokes. Okay, Noah loved my joke. Thank you, Noah. I appreciate you being here for my humor. Somehow I got something wet on my sweatshirt. I don't know how it happened. I'm a mess this morning. It was a good one. Thank you, Anya. I appreciate those who understand my humor. My mom is not among those people. We have a different sense of humor. My brother gets my humor. My brother and I have the same sense of humor. I came at the perfect time. I also drink iced coffee. Thank you, Ashley. Thank you. Thank you. Hey, Mom, you're a saint. You taught your daughter how to cure my headaches yesterday. It's true. Mom, I used one of your tricks from when we were kids to help Brittany yesterday. That's 100% true. Yes, my mom is a doctor, you guys, and I use a lot of her tricks to help a lot of people. My mom is a phenomenal doctor, but even better than a phenomenal doctor, she's great at triage, which is always helpful. I glitched right at the joke. No, that's the worst. All right. Good morning, Brian. Good morning. Good morning, everybody. We're going to finish this book today. I'm going to get a sip of water before I go sit down because I'm sure there are going to be a lot of voices in this, so I need to prepare myself. This is me extra hydrating my voice so that I can do those voices for y'all because there's no voices without water. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Hydrate your vocal cords, friends. Keep them healthy. Yes, I can see you, Mary. I could see you before, though. We're finishing the book today, you guys. We're finishing it. We're finishing it come hell or high water. We are finishing this book. It's going to be crazy. I am scared. I'm worried. I've been worried almost this whole book. The last book was so uplifting, and this book is so, when's your next NY trip? You know, I don't know, Brian. It'll probably depend on my brother. Oh yeah, no worries, Mary. I always wonder that, Anya. Yeah, I'm worried. The great news is, you guys, I already have book 3 in the house. It's on the to be read shelf waiting to go. Today is espresso coffee day in Italy. I love that. Mom, you just committed a cardinal sin for Italians. It's espresso, not espresso. There is no X in the Italian language. Mom, you are 100% Italian. You were raised in an Italian family. How? Espresso. There's no X in the Italian language, you guys. Anyone who says espresso is not doing it. Espresso. No X. Italians don't even have the letter. It's not there. It's like A, B, C, D, E, F, blah, 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 blah. Skip the X. Thank you. Especially with a tiny espresso coffee maker. Because they're making fun of Americans. Yeah, maybe because they're making fun of Americans. That would be the only excuse. It's the only excuse for my Italian mother to do it. She's 100% Italian, y'all. Yes. Okay. Are we ready? Is everyone ready to buckle in? I bet there's going to be a lot of voices in this one. A lot of voices. Bullseye. We are on chapter 17. She's just making sure you're paying attention. That's funny. That's why I always buy the whole series, not waiting to have stress. Yeah, Katie, espresso. I did it. I learned Italian from Sasha. That's right, sweetheart. You can learn a lot of Italian. If you want to know how to say you're going on a trip, you can use the word viaggio. That's trip. You can use that one today. Viaggio. trip. I'm going on a trip or a vacation or whatever you feel like calling it. That's your word of the day, Caddy. You got this, kiddo. Killing the game. Viaggio. All right. Caddy is so cute. She's the sweetest. We're going to read chapter 17, and it is called Familiar Faces. Whew. Buckle in, kiddos, because we got a lot to do today. The witches and the lynxes of Ravencrest were enjoying a relaxing night in the graveyard. Stitches, Bibi, and Pip wore tinted glasses and lounged around the 3 tombs as they took in the moonlight. Sprout was soaking. I'm gonna sneeze, so hang on to your hats and glasses, because this here's the wildest ride in the wilderness. Come on. I don't want to sneeze in the middle of reading. Just get it out. No, we're not gonna sneeze? Okay, great. Apparently we're not gonna sneeze. Anyway. As they took in the moonlight, Sprout was soaking her feet in a jar of fertilizer and pleasantly sighed to herself while her body absorbed the nutrients. The lynxes were gathered around the witches and lazily stretched, scratched, and cleaned themselves. I'm so glad Mistress Mara gave us the night off, Sprout said. It's been ages since we've had a self-care day. Why is it self-scare day? Sorry, I botched the joke on this one. It's been ages since we've had a self-scare day. Why is it called a self-scare day? Pip asked. Because it feels so good. It's frightening. I just adore moon bathing, Stitches said. Can someone pass me the moon screen? Bibi handed her a bottle of blue lotion and Stitches rubbed it on her skin. Is there a point to moon bathing? Pip asked. I mean, does it actually do something? It gives witches a nice alabaster glow, Bibi said. Be careful you don't get moonburn, though, Sprout advised. The last time I got one, I glowed in the dark for 3 weeks. Pip quickly retrieved the bottle of moon screen and applied another layer to her skin. Suddenly, their peaceful night was interrupted by a boom in the distance. The witches sat up on the tombs and looked at the horizon. Racing towards the manor at lightning speed were 4 unicorns with silver horns and magenta manes. The majestic steeds pulled the golden carriage behind them, and they galloped faster and faster as they approached Ravencrest's iron fence. The unicorn smashed into the gate's horns first and burst it open, snapping the chains that kept it locked. Brick and stone were knocked off the top of the fence, and they hit the ground with 2 loud thumps. As the golden carriage entered the property, the gargoyles leaped back to their feet and charged after the intruders. Emeralda leaned out the carriage window, and with one snap, brick and stone were turned into emerald statues and froze in their tracks. After the gargoyles were stopped, a dozen trees pulled themselves out of the dirt and chased the trespassing carriage. Xanthos hopped outside the vehicle, and the flames on his head and shoulders rose several feet. One look at the fiery boy, and the trees backed away. Stitches, Bibi, Sprout, and Pip were intrigued by the dramatic entrance. The unicorns parked the golden carriage in front of the witches, and Lucy, Emeralda, Tangerina, and Skylene rushed out of the vehicle. Xanthos ran up to them, and the fairies' first glance at the dreary manor gave them the creeps, and they all huddled close together. So this is the Ravencrest School of Witchcraft? Tangerina said. It's like a living nightmare, Skylene said. Thank you, Stitches said with an appreciative grin. Lucy, what are all the fairies doing here? Pip asked. I thought you left to find your swans a new home. Yeah. They're out there living the dream, she said. Where's Mistress Mara? Lucy's sense of urgency concerned the witches. We don't know, Bibi said. She left this morning. Why? Where's the fire? Sprout asked. You know, besides the boy over there who's literally on fire. Lucy groaned. She didn't have time to break the news gently. Girls, what I'm about to tell you is going to be difficult to hear, she said. You're going to feel hurt, betrayed, and it's going to turn your whole world upside down. Oh, I can't wait, Stitches said. Mistress Mara didn't open Ravencrest to teach witchcraft. She was using it to find a host for a horrible curse, Lucy declared. She and the Horned One have been secretly plotting to kill the fairy godmother and seek revenge on mankind. She used the enrollment ceremony to curse me with something called a shadow beast. It's an entity that boosts a witch's abilities for a single enchantment. A shadow beast grows inside a host like a parasite, and if the fairies hadn't helped me remove it, the curse, it would have killed me. What? Bibi said.
You can't be serious, Sprout said. Mistress Mara would never hurt the students, Stitches said. Curse for 100 years? Absolutely. But hurt one? Never. For once, Lucy isn't exaggerating, Esmeralda said. Yeah, we witnessed the whole thing, Xanthos said. Yeah, and I can prove it, Lucy said. Obviously, Mistress Mara hasn't turned me into a lynx, but if we went into her study, I bet we'd find a curse counter with my face on it. Without wasting another moment, Lucy dashed towards the manor, and the witches and the fairies followed her inside. She hurried up the grand staircase and led everyone to the tall hallway on the 7.5 floor. Lucy moved the scaly armchair from the corner and placed it under Mistress Mara's study door. She used the chair to climb the door into the doorway, but when she turned back, the witches were too afraid to join her. Well, come on, Lucy said. What are you waiting for? We're not going in there, Bibi said. What if Mistress Mara comes back and catches us? Sprout said. I don't want to be turned into a lynx. Yet, Stitches said. Lucy groaned. Okay, fine. I'll go in myself, she said. Everybody else, you wait here. She proceeded into the study on her own and headed directly into the closet of jack-o'-lanterns. Lucy searched the shelves, and it didn't take long to find a pumpkin with her defiant expression staring back at her. She quickly removed the jack-o'-lantern from the shelf to show the others, but as Lucy headed out of the closet, something peculiar caught her eye. Lucy passed a pair of jack-o'-lanterns with the face of a refined couple. The man had a wooden pipe in his mouth, fuzzy mutton chops covered the majority of his face, and a monocle was placed over his left eye. The woman's hair was styled into 2 buns that resembled horns, and a pearl necklace was wrapped around her neck. She had inquisitive eyes. Lucy was certain she recognized the couple, but she couldn't recall from when or where. But she had definitely seen this woman's unique eyes in person. Suddenly, the creaking sound of a floorboard came from inside the study, and Lucy cautiously peered out of the closet and was relieved to see it was just the invisible butler. He was joined by old Billy, who glared at Lucy from behind the servant's wall. From the wall behind the servant. Not very, Jen. We've just read about 1 page, so we're just good. Lucy is in Mistress Mara's office retrieving her cursed pumpkin thing. As Lucy gazed into the illustration's inquisitive eyes, it slowly dawned on her why she recognized the couple in the closet. Wait a second, she said. The people on those pumpkins, they're you, aren't they? Old Billy nodded, and the invisible butler's monocle bobbled up and down in the space above his collar. Lucy glanced back at the jack-o'-lanterns and noticed that a pendant with the letter R was attached to the woman's pearl necklace, and the man's wooden pipe was also engraved with the letter R. Lucy could tell the letter was significant to the couple, and she scrunched her forehead to try to think of a reason. Holy whodunit, she said. You guys are Lord and Lady Ravencrest. This house wasn't a generous donation like Mistress Mara said. She cursed you, and then she stole it from you. Once again, the goat and the invisible butler nodded. So that's why old Billy led me into this study, she said to herself. She wanted me to know that Mistress Mara had cursed her and stolen her home, and on the night I got lost, I thought the manor itself was playing tricks on me, but the butler was opening and closing all the doors. I just didn't see him because he's invisible. He purposely guided me into the hallway so I would hear Mistress Mara and the Horned One's conversation. That also means he was naked while he was doing it, but I'll save that concern for another time. Lucy thought that she had figured everything out, but based on the couple's somber body language, she realized there was more to the story. Old Billy's gaze drifted past Lucy, and the butler raised his cufflink, both gesturing at something behind her. Lucy turned around. At the very back of the closet, she saw a jack-o'-lantern that had been placed on its own shelf. It was the pumpkin she had discovered during her first visit into the study. Lucy had trouble recognizing the carving at first, but now that she was looking at it with fresh eyes, it suddenly hit her. Oh my God, she gasped. It's Bristol. Lucy grabbed Bristol's jack-o'-lantern and bolted back down the hallway. You guys aren't going to believe what I just found, she announced. Lucy tossed the pumpkin to Tangerina and Skylene, and the girls inspected the carving and then shot her a dirty look. Nice try, Lucy, but the witches aren't going to fall for this, Tangerina said. Yeah, this pumpkin is way too pretty to be you, Skylene said. No, that's not mine. This is mine, Lucy said. She tossed the other pumpkin to Stitches and Sprout. Lucy's likeness was unmistakable and proof that Mistress Mara had cursed her. The witches moaned like their favorite sports team had lost a game. Well, it looks like Lucy is telling the truth, Stitches said. Check the Mara pool. Oh, sorry, wrong voice. Check the Mara pool. Who had killed the fairy godmother and seek revenge on mankind? Sprout pulled up the rolled piece of paper out of her bushy hair and read from it. Let's see. I had plagued the world with exploding bats. Stitches had filled the rivers with blood and guts. BB had killed a diplomat and seek revenge on mankind. She said. BB was the closest, so she wins again. Ah, man, Stitches griped. How does she win everything? I was born lucky, BB boasted. You know the drill. Give me your money, witches. Stitches and Sprout begrudgingly handed BB a couple of gold coins. The fairies couldn't believe that the witches had made a game of this. Wait, you knew that Mistress Mara was plotting something? Emeralda asked. And you made bets on it? Xanthos asked. Stitches shrugged. Well, we knew she didn't open Ravencrest out of the goodness of her heart, she said. Witches never help anyone but themselves. Lucy put 2 fingers in her mouth and whistled to get everyone's attention. You guys are missing the important part, she exclaimed. Look at this pumpkin. Recognize the carving? Mistress Mara didn't just curse me. She put a curse on Bristol, too. I found the jack-o'-lantern 3 days ago, but I didn't recognize her. But how did she curse her? Skylene asked. Bristol doesn't look any different. Curses don't always affect someone's appearance, Lucy said. Sometimes they can disturb a person's health or stamina or their mood, Tangerina asked. The fairies all rolled their eyes at her remarks. What? Tangerina asked offensively. I'm not trying to be judgmental, but Bristol has been in a bad mood for weeks. Everyone went silent as they thought about what Tangerina had said. Bristol's recent behavior had been extremely out of character, and they knew something had to have caused her recent mood swings, but they never would have imagined a curse was the culprit. Actually, I think Tangerina's onto something, Xanthos said. If Mistress Mara wanted to kill Bristol, she'd want her to be as vulnerable as possible when she did it. Maybe she thought cursing Bristol mentally would be more effective than cursing her physically?
So that's why she was so unhappy, Pip said. Just before I left the academy, Bristol told me she was feeling really negative, but she couldn't explain where it was coming from.
Yeah, well, now we know, Lucy said. Bristol's always been good about hiding her feelings. Remember last year? Bristol knew about the Snow Queen for weeks before we did, and we were completely oblivious. She bottled up all her feelings and anxiety to spare us from being worried as she was. The fact that we've even noticed Bristol's behavior before now shows how miserable she must be. And I'm sure all the stuff with the 333 has only just made it worse. The comment triggered Emeralda's memory, and she suddenly gasped. What's wrong, Em? Xanthos asked. Earlier this evening, Bristol asked me to take over the academy if anything happened to her, Emeralda said. I thought she was just tired. I told her that we would talk more when she had time to rest, but now I'm thinking she might have been planning something. When I returned to her office, she left her wand and a note behind it. I haven't had the chance to read it yet.
Do you have it with you?
Skylene said. Emeralda retrieved the note from her pocket and read it aloud. Oh, snap. Oh, snap. I didn't think this was going to happen. Dear Emeralda, by the time you read this, I'll have surrendered myself to the 333 and you'll be the new fairy godmother. This may seem like a drastic decision, but I promise you it's our best shot at defeating them. No, Skylene said. She couldn't have, Xanthos said. Why would she surrender to them? Tangerina said. Because her mind isn't working like it should, Lucy said. What else does it say, Em? Before I leave, it's important I pass along all the information I've learned about the 333 so you're prepared. The 333 call themselves the Righteous Brotherhood, and they consist of exactly 333 clansmen. The roles have been passed down from father to eldest son for the last 333 families in the Southern Kingdom. Each clansman has devoted his entire existence, life, whatever it comes to afterwards, to upholding something known as the righteous philosophy. They believe the world can only function properly if mankind is in control and if men are in control of mankind. Over the centuries, the Brotherhood have successfully applied their oppressive philosophy to the laws of the Southern Kingdom, and they've eliminated any group that stands in their way. The Brotherhood operates from a fortress on the shore of the South Sea. Their weapons are made from a material called bloodstone, but no one knows where the material came from or why it defies magic. The clan is currently being commanded by a man they call the Righteous King, and he wears a suit made entirely out of bloodstone with a matching mask that's shaped out of a ram's skull.
What a coincidence, Sprout said. That sounds exactly like the outfit the horned one wears. You think that they shop at the same store?
Lucy rolled her eyes. That cannot be a coincidence, she said. Obviously, the horned one is the Righteous King.
But that doesn't make any sense, Pip said. That would mean Mistress Mara is working with the Righteous Brotherhood.
Actually, it makes perfect sense, Lucy said. When I was in show business, we used to have a phrase, the enemy of my enemy is the only safe understudy. It means that people can look past their differences and work together as long as they share a common interest. And in this case, killing Bristol is their common interest.
BB, what do you think? Stitches asked. You're always right about everything.
I bet he's backstabbing everyone in a barbaric quest for power to fill a deep-seated void caused by loneliness and a loveless childhood, BB said. The fairy's eyes went wide. Well, case closed, Lucy said. Keep reading, Em. Don't let the righteous king fool you. He's actually King Champion the 14th's eldest son, Maximus, in disguise. Maximus has recently framed me for the murder of his father to tarnish my name and turn the people against the magical community. However, the sooner I disassociate myself from the fairies, the less damage he can do. So I've decided to surrender willingly and hopefully salvage what's left of the fairies' reputation. Once I'm gone, the Brotherhood plans to wage war on the magical community. Right now, the clan are convinced that the fairies and the witches will be weaker without me, but I know my absence will only make you stronger. I've made so many mistakes recently. I know that they'll all be better off without me. You'll lead the magical community in ways that I never could. I apologize for how abrupt my departure is, and I hope that one day you'll learn to forgive me. I must reiterate that this is the only way the magical community can win the war against the righteous Brotherhood. Please take care of yourself and keep everyone safe. Bristol. P.S. While you keep track of the Righteous Brotherhood, it's important to keep an eye on the globe in the office. The Snow Queen is trapped in a cavern below the northern mountains. As long as the northern lights are shining in the sky, the Snow Queen remains a prisoner. If the lights ever fade from view, it means that she's escaped. I wish I had more time to explain, but if you ever need advice or guidance, find the cavern in the mountains. Part of Madame Weatherbury still exists within the Snow Queen, and she can help you. She totally told them all. Now they all know. Wow. The whole letter was shocking, but Bristol's last line about Madame Weatherbury was the most shocking of all. The fairies expected Bristol to say that she was kidding in the next passage, but there was nothing left for Emeralda to read.
She's not serious,
Skylane said. Is she? No, of course not, Tangerina said. It's the curse talking. It made her delusional, Xanthos said. Exactly. She doesn't even know what she's saying, Emeralda said. And even if part of Madame Weatherbury was still alive, why would she exist within the Snow Queen? Lucy cringed and let out a deep sigh, already regretting what she was about to say. Because Madame Weatherbury is the Snow Queen, she confessed. The fairies glared at Lucy like she had said something horribly offensive.
Shame on you, Lucy.
Why would you say such a nasty thing? Tangerina asked. Madame Weatherbury gave us everything we have, Xanthos said. How could you be so disrespectful? Yeah, I'm telling you the truth. I saw her with my own eyes, Lucy said. Madame Weatherbury thought the only way that we could get mankind's approval was giving mankind a problem that only we could solve. She turned herself into a monster so that we could be the heroes and win the world's affection. That's why I went to Ravencrest for a couple of days. I was furious with Bristol for not being honest with me. Then why weren't you honest with us? Emeralda said. Why did you run to Ravencrest instead of telling us the truth? Lucy took a moment to think about it, and the answer surprised her. I guess for the same reason that Bristol kept it from me, she said. When I found out the truth, I was devastated. I felt like everything Madame Weatherbury had taught me was a lie, and it made me question my relationship with magic. I didn't want you guys to go through that, so I thought I was doing the right thing by keeping it to myself, but I'm sorry. The fairies stared off into space and quietly shook their heads. They didn't want to believe a word of it, but they knew that Lucy was telling the truth. Tears came to their eyes, and they were bombarded with heartbreak, anger, and a sense of betrayal all at once. I know exactly how you feel, but don't make the same mistake I did, Lucy said. I lashed out. Instead of blaming Madame Weatherbury, I lashed out at Bristol, and I didn't understand what an impossible situation she was put in. Living with such a big secret had to be torturing her, but she sacrificed her own peace of mind to protect ours. Even while the curse was making her miserable, Bristol never stopped putting us first, and now she's in trouble, and she needs our help. So, what are we going to do? Stand around licking our wounds, or are we going to go save her? Lucy's message was more profound than Lucy was expecting, and the fairies didn't know how to respond. They looked to one another for reassurance, but deep down they were all thinking the same thing. Bristol would never abandon them in their hour of need, and they weren't going to lose her without a fight. Well, of course we're going to save her, Tangerina said. You really think that we would just leave her to die?
Yeah, what are we? Witches?
Skylane said. Oh, sorry, I forgot where I was.
Compliment accepted,
Stitches said with a wink. I don't know how to wink as a creepy little Stitches doll. But how do we know that Bristol's even still alive? Emeralda asked. Does Ravencrest have a map of magic we could check before we go? Lucy held up Bristol's pumpkin and peeked inside. We don't need a map of magic, she said. The candle in her jack-o'-lantern's fading, but it's still lit. That means her curse is still active, which means she must be alive. Emeralda sighed and caressed the pumpkin like it was the real Bristol. Okay, hang in there, girl, she said. Help is on the way. Well, we've got to act fast, Xanthos said. Bristol surrendered hours ago. She could be anywhere by now. Yeah,
I bet the Brotherhood took her to the secret lair inside of a volcano,
Stitches said. I bet they put her in a hot air balloon 1,000 miles above the earth, Sprout said. I bet they took her to the fortress by the sea, Phoebe said. Well, in that case, we'll definitely go into the fortress, Lucy told the others.
I'm coming with you, Pip announced. Bristol tried to warn me about Mistress Mara, but I didn't listen. If I don't make it up to her somehow, I'll never forgive myself.
Lucy was grateful for her support, but the fairies needed a lot more than Pip to stand a chance against the Brotherhood. She turned towards Stitches, Phoebe, and Sprout with large pleading eyes. The Brotherhood is really dangerous, she said. They outnumber us by hundreds, and they have weapons that defy magic. I know witches are supposed to only think about themselves, but if you could find it in your dark hearts to help us, we could really use you. The witches scratched their chins as they considered her requests.
How dangerous will it be?
Stitches asked. Well, extremely, Lucy said. Will there be violence? Sprout asked. Definitely. And casualties? Phoebe asked. Most likely. The witches smirked at Lucy and cackled with excitement.
Say no more, Stitches said. You had us at dangerous.
Oof. Okay. Chapter 18. It's called A Deal with Death. Bristol opened her eyes. It was like waking from a deep sleep, but not a sleep she had experienced before. She wasn't tired or groggy, but surprisingly rested and alert. Her body wasn't stiff or sore, but unusually relaxed and limber. She didn't feel anxious or gloomy, but unexpectedly calm and collected. The temperature wasn't too warm or too cold. It was just comfortable. Everything was so comfortable. It was kind of a nice change. Strangely, when Bristol awoke, she was already on her feet, and she stood in the middle of a gray field with a perfectly smooth surface. She was facing a magnificent white tree that was engraved with the name Bristol. A silver clock was embedded in the center of its trunk, and the hands had stopped turning at 3:33. Bristol heard ticking when she gazed up, and she saw thousands of pocket watches hanging from the branches on the glittering silver chains. The field stretched for miles around her and was home to dozens of other white trees, but none of them had as many pocket watches as the tree with Bristol's name. In fact, most of the other trees' branches were bare. As Bristol gazed across the land, she noticed a bright sun hovering over the horizon to her right and a massive full moon hovering over the horizon to the left. I'm not going to lie, I love the little witches. I do too. I think they're hilarious. Phoebe, Stitches, and Sprout are hilarious. Between them was the most spectacular sky she had ever seen. There were hundreds of orbiting planets, thousands of spiraling galaxies, and millions of twinkling stars. Everything was so vivid, the entire universe seemed within reach, and each of the celestial bodies gave off a hypnotic chime. Bristol could hear the stars as much as she could see them. Bristol hadn't known such dazzling colors and soothing sounds existed, and she didn't think words could describe all the beauty above her. Bristol wandered through the field, exploring the peculiar place. Something felt oddly familiar about this strange land, like part of her had always been there. She wasn't worried or scared as she walked around because, for reasons unknown to her, Bristol knew that she was perfectly safe. All the trees stood at different heights, and each of them was engraved with a different name. Their trunks were also embedded with silver clocks, but unlike the clock on Bristol's tree, the others were working and turning at unique speeds. Some of them had names she recognized, like Lucy, Barry, Emeralda, Xanthos, Celeste, but there were also engravings she didn't recognize, like John, Lloyd, Alex, Connor, Esmea. You hear that? I'm gonna go ahead and say it again. John, Lloyd, Alex, Connor, Esmea. You know what these trees are, right? Yeah. Curiously, the mysterious names belonged to similar trees that hadn't been planted, and their clocks were frozen at 12 o'clock, as if their time hadn't started yet. As she continued through the field, Bristol spotted someone moving nearby. She walked toward the stranger and saw that it was Mistress Mara. The witch was aggressively pacing, and her face was tense with worry. She was deep in thought, and she didn't look up as Bristol approached. After the events in the fortress, Bristol had a million concerns of her own, but the most important question escaped her lips. "Are we dead?" Bristol asked. "Well, not yet," the witch said. Mistress Mara never stopped pacing and kept her eyes on the ground. "Then what are we doing here, and what is this place?" We're waiting, obviously, she said. This is the space between life and the other side. Mistress Mara gestured toward the sun and the moon, and suddenly Bristol realized they weren't what she had originally thought. What she had mistaken for the full moon was actually the world, and what she had mistaken for the sun was actually a bright light shining from somewhere beyond the universe. Bristol wasn't standing on a field attached to a planet, but a strip of land that was floating freely through the cosmos. And what are the trees? She asked. Why are there names and clocks on them? The witch groaned as if she had more pressing matters to think about. Each tree represents a person that you've encountered or a person you will encounter if you survive. Mistress Marr explained. The clocks represent the time each person has left on Earth, and they spin at different speeds because, well, time is relative. Some people need decades to live a fulfilling life, while others can achieve things only within a minute. Still, it seems unfair that some people have more time than others, Bristol said. Well, everything seems unfair when you measure it with the wrong tools, Mistress Mara said. Life isn't supposed to be measured in time or luck by privilege. Life is supposed to be measured by purpose. Everyone is born with a purpose, and whether they choose to believe it or not, some are meant to learn lessons, some are meant to teach lessons, while others are simply meant to observe. Naturally, a lot of people resent life when their purpose isn't easy or when it doesn't match up with their hopes and dreams, but no one leaves the world without completing exactly what they were meant to do. That's just the rule of life. And what about the watches? She asked. Why are there so many on my tree? Oh, the watches represent lives that you've saved, the witch said. Sometime, somewhere, those people became lost and their trees were unrooted, so to speak. Because of something you said or did, they found the strength to keep ticking. Even though your clock is stopped, your tree will never stop growing because of the lives you've touched. Bristol glanced back at her tree and was amazed that each of the ticking watches symbolized a person with a beating heart. She knew that people liked her, but Bristol didn't know that she mattered so much to so many people. It made her ashamed of surrendering to the Brotherhood and giving up her life so willingly. Mistress Mara was surprisingly insightful about the space between life and death, and Bristol became curious as to why she was so knowledgeable. But before she could inquire any further, the witch became lost in her own thoughts and began muttering to herself. I was such an idiot, Mistress Mara roared. Seven never cared about anything but power. I should have known better. I should have seen it coming, but I was so distracted by vengeance I flew right into his trap like a moth to a flame. Bristol sighed with disappointment. I'm partially to blame, she said. Somehow he knew exactly what to say and exactly when I needed to hear it, and I fell for every word. Yes, but you were cursed, the witch said. There's no excuse for my stupidity. Bristol did a double take. She was certain she misheard her. Excuse me? She asked. What do you mean I was cursed? For the first time, Mistress Mara stopped pacing and looked Bristol directly in the eye. Have you noticed any changes lately? The witch asked. Have you thought any unexplained thoughts or feelings, negative? Have you been distracted, distancing yourself from the people that you love? Has every problem seemed impossible to solve? Has your self-confidence been replaced by self-hate and scrutiny? Have you convinced yourself that you're nothing but failure and the world will be better off without you? Bristol couldn't believe what she was hearing. She had never felt more exposed in her entire life and slowly backed away from the witch. How did you know that? Bristol gasped. Because I'm the one who turned your mind against you, Mistress Mara confessed. But why? If you knew that we were planning to seek revenge on mankind, you would have stopped us. We had to make you as weak and vulnerable as possible so that we could succeed. Are you crazy? This is the first time witches and fairies have been safe and respected by mankind in 600 years. Why would you jeopardize that? Mistress Mara scoffed at her and continued pacing. Oh, it's complicated. You haven't lived long enough to understand, the witch said. And whose fault is that? Bristol exclaimed. Thanks to you, I'm stuck somewhere between life and death. The least you could do is explain yourself. Mistress Mara tried to walk away, but Bristol followed her. The witch rolled her eyes and let out a reluctant sigh. Fine, she moaned. Are you familiar with the story of the daughter of death? The phrase rang a bell, but Bristol recalled she'd read a book that mentioned it. That's a legend, isn't it? She asked. Death sent his daughter to Earth, hoping the separation would help him understand human grief. Unfortunately for him, she found a way to stay on Earth and live forever. The two never reunited, and Death entered a state of eternal mourning. Mistress Mara gazed at the world with a heavy heart. Can you blame me? She said. Who wouldn't want to live forever if they could? There's music and food and weather and love and laughter. I was addicted to life from the moment I arrived. Most children like to defy their parents when they're young, and what could be more defiant to death than a daughter who loves living? Bristol assumed the witch was joking, and she laughed at the remarks, but Mistress Mara turned to her with a very grave expression, and she wasn't kidding. "Oh, you're being serious?" Bristol said, and her eyes grew wide. "Oh, I suppose that makes sense. Who else could just kill people with their touch, and who else would know so much about this place?" Mistress Mara nodded. "This place has changed over time," she said. "All the clocks used to move at the same speed before my father sent me into the world. Every soul was given 100 years to live, but when he lost me, he decided to change the rules of death. Instead of monitoring people's time, my father started collecting souls after their purpose was complete, since my purpose was to make death feel grief. And since that purpose was accomplished, he thought the new rule would reunite us. However, when my father created me, he didn't realize that I had inherited so many of his traits. Death is timeless, and his purpose is eternal. He's the one thing that He is the one thing in existence that can't be killed. And no matter how many times he tried to take my life, I couldn't die." "Wait a second," Bristol said. "I heard a rumor that bloodstone came from death, but that's not a rumor, is it? He created that for you?" Bloodstone, disease, disaster, violence, starvation, plague. Anything that can end a life was invented for me," Mistress Mara said. "It seems like such a ghastly relationship, but it's actually quite charming when you think about it. A lot of parents do drastic things to reunite with their children." "I'm confused," Bristol said. "What does being the daughter of death have to do with seeking revenge on mankind?" "Oh, I've been around for a very long time, and the hardest part about living forever is losing the people that I love," Mistress Mara said. "But when those people were taken from me in vain, and that savagery went unpunished, well, that pain never went away. For thousands of years, I've watched mankind slaughter witches and fairies without consequence, losing friend after friend and lover after lover. When you legalized magic, you secured peace and acceptance for the magical community, but it did not erase the crimes committed against us. So when Seven presented me with a chance to avenge the people I lost, I had to accept it. Seven told me that his parents were killed by an angry mob, and as a result, he developed a hatred for humanity that was equal to mine. He wanted to create a righteous army of the dead, and he finally would hold mankind responsible. But first, he needed a witch who was willing to partner with him. And like a fool, I believed his intentions were genuine. I opened the Ravencrest School of Witchcraft to produce a shadow beast powerful enough to raise the clansmen from the dead. Then I cursed your mind to feel constantly miserable, with one very important exception. The curse was temporarily suspended whenever you were in Seven's presence. We knew that you would interpret the breaks as the fondness for him, and you'd undoubtedly become attached to him, and you would never suspect that he was deceiving you." Had Bristol been on Earth, the revelation would have made her stick to her stomach. She was furious at Mistress Mara for inflicting such a cruel and manipulative curse on her, but in many ways, Bristol was extremely relieved. Her recent thoughts, feelings, and poor judgment weren't even her fault. Learning that it was all due to a curse made Bristol's shame fade away, and her self-confidence returned. "If you can't die, then why are you here?" Bristol asked. "Why aren't you back on Earth trying to stop him?" "Well, because I can't stop him," Mistress Mara said. "Seven was honest about one thing, that he and I are equally hateful, and you don't fight fire by adding more fire. To defeat the righteous army of the dead, the world needs someone to unite them like they've never been united before. They'll have to convince mankind, the fairies, the witches, and the talking creatures to work together. And there's only one person that I know of who's capable of that." "Me?" Bristol asked. "But what if I don't survive?" "Well, that's why I'm here," the witch said. "I have to ensure that you don't cross over, and I'm willing to negotiate whatever it takes." Before Bristol had a chance to ask another question, the gray field was suddenly engulfed by an enormous eclipse. Mistress Mara eyed the darkness with suspense. "He's here," the witch said. "Who?" "My father." The eclipse started to recede, and the shade collected into a single shadow across the field. The shadow rose off the ground, gaining dimension and texture as it grew. They transformed into a man who was 10 feet tall. His face and body were completely hidden under a pitch-black cloak made from darkness itself. Bristol's first sight of death should have been frightening, but she didn't feel an ounce of fear as she gazed at him. On the contrary, it was like seeing the ship home after a very, very long voyage. "Hello, Father," Mistress Mara said with a warm smile. "It is good to see you again." Even though he didn't say a word or move a muscle, Bristol could sense thousands of years' worth of tension between the two. Death ignored his daughter's greeting and walked towards Bristol at a determined pace. The witch stepped between them, placing herself in her father's path. "She shouldn't be here," Mistress Mara said. "Her purpose is only beginning." Death acted as if he couldn't hear his daughter and kept moving closer. "You need her alive just as much as the world does," the witch said. "Death is an essential part of life, and it's what makes people appreciate living. But you forget that life is an essential part of you. If you don't send her back to Earth, the righteous army of the dead will destroy so many lives that you'll be irrelevant." Death wasn't concerned, and he proceeded forward. "I made a mistake," Mistress Mara said. "Someone used my emotions to play me like a fiddle, and I gave them everything they wanted. But if memory serves me correctly, you made a very similar mistake once. Someone blinded you with desire and tricked you into giving them something you regret very much, something that still haunts you to this day. Perhaps if you send Bristol back to Earth, she can fix both of our mistakes." Bristol had no idea what Mistress Mara was talking about. What sort of mistake had Death made? However, she could tell that the witch was getting her father's attention because his pace had started to slow down. When Death was just a few feet away from Bristol, Mistress Mara took a deep breath and offered her father something she knew he wouldn't refuse. "If you send her back, I'll take her place," she said. Death suddenly stopped. He and his daughter glared at each other in silence as if they were communicating telepathically, and after a few moments, Mistress Mara nodded like they had reached an agreement. "Very well," the witch said. "What's happening?" Bristol whispered. "He's made a counteroffer," Mistress Mara said. "If I take your place, my father will send you back to Earth on one condition. You must fix his greatest regret." What kind of regret?" she asked. "Many centuries ago, my father was deceived by a woman," Mistress Mara said. "The woman claimed that she could kill me with an enchantment from an ancient spell book. The enchantment was as old as the earth, and Death had forgotten such a thing existed. In return for her help, the woman asked my father for immortality. By then, my father was so desperate to have me back that he accepted her proposal with no questions asked. Unfortunately, the moment that he granted the woman immortality, she disappeared without a trace and never fulfilled her end of the bargain. This woman, this immortal, still roams the earth, making a mockery of everything that life and death stand for. If you agree to find and terminate the immortal, my father will send you back to Earth." "How do I kill the immortal?" Bristol asked. "Well, with the same enchantment that she intended for me," Mistress Mara said. "My father will give you 1 year to locate and kill the immortal, but if you haven't completed the task by then, the agreement will expire and your life will end." Bristol went quiet as she considered Death's offer. It was a huge commitment to make, but what choice did she have? She would give anything for another chance to stop Seven and the righteous army of the dead. "Okay, this enchantment, if it's powerful enough to kill the immortal, could it destroy the army of the dead too?" Bristol asked. Mistress Mara turned to her father and Death slowly nodded. "All right then," Bristol said. "I agree." "Then it's settled," Mistress Mara said. "Congratulations, Miss Evergreen. You've just made a deal with Death." Suddenly, Bristol was distracted by the sound of ticking. It was louder than all the clocks in the field put together, and when Bristol looked toward the noise, she saw that the clock on her tree had restarted. As soon as she laid eyes on it, Bristol was unexpectedly propelled backwards. She rose off the ground and flew through the air as an invisible force pulled her back to Earth. Bristol grabbed hold of the tree branch as she ascended, desperate to ask one more question before she returned to life. "Wait!" she cried. "What about the curse? How do I break it?" "There's only one way to break a curse of the mind," Mistress Mara said. "What?" "With the mind itself." Bristol held onto the branch with all her might, expecting the witch to give her more information, but that was all Mistress Mara said. The daughter of Death linked arms with her father and rested her head on his shoulder. He walked her into the horizon, and the two disappeared into the light. On the other side, reunited at last. The branch slipped out of Bristol's grasp. She flew far, far, far from the field and soared through the universe. All the colorful planets and galaxies whirled around her. Bristol started to lose consciousness as she was pulled faster and faster back to Earth. All the stars faded from sight. Chapter 19. The Mind Itself. Bristol opened her eyes. It was like waking from the worst sleep of her life. She was so exhausted that she could feel it in her bones. Her head was pounding and every muscle in her body ached. The ocean air was freezing, but she was too weak to shiver. Bristol awoke to the sound of marching boots and clanking armor. As her eyes adjusted, she noticed that there were 4 dirt walls surrounding her. Bristol looked around and discovered she was lying at the bottom of a deep grave. She could see the fortress's tower stretching into the sky above her, and she realized she was still somewhere in the courtyard. She heard the living and the deceased clansmen moving near the surface, following the commands of the righteous king. "I'll make sure we clean out the arsenal. Don't leave a single piece of bloodstone behind," Seven ordered. "After tonight, there'll be no need to return to this miserable place ever again. And make it quick. I want to get to Chariot Hills by sunrise." Bristol didn't know how or why she was still alive. The last thing she remembered was her slow death on the platform, and as she pondered the misery, she heard the sound of ticking coming from somewhere inside the grave. Bristol found a silver pocket watch that she had never seen before clipped to the waist of her pantsuit. Her name was engraved on the back of it, and curiously, instead of 12 hours, the watch was counting 12 months. The pocket watch triggered Bristol's memory, and she suddenly recalled her time in the gray field. She might have thought that it was just a dream, but the watch was proof that that had actually happened. Bristol had made a deal with death, and the watch was a reminder of their bargain. She had exactly 1 year to find and kill the immortal with an ancient enchantment, and if time permitted, she would use the same enchantment to destroy the righteous army of the dead. However, none of it would happen if Bristol didn't survive the fortress first. She inspected the dirt walls and didn't know how she would get out of the grave without her wand. Bristol was in so much pain she could barely sit up, let alone climb. Don't even bother. You'll never escape. The walls are too tall to climb. You're going to die down here. You deserve to die down here. For a moment, Bristol thought the disparaging thoughts were right. She was so eager to return to life, but now that she was back in her life, her deal with death seemed pointless. Mistress Mara's curse had made her so emotionally and physically depleted that she didn't even have the energy or willpower to keep going. That's it. There's no reason to continue. No reason to keep fighting. There's nothing to live for. So don't. As she sat in her grave, wounded and heartbroken, the ticking watch reminded Bristol of the space between life and death. She visualized the stars and the planets in the sky and the smooth surface of the gray field and the beautiful white trees. Bristol remembered all the pocket watches hanging from her branches and how each of them represented a living and breathing person. She thought about all the souls she'd saved, all the lives she'd helped, and all the people that she had encouraged. It made her think about all the friends and family members who had inspired her over the years, all the love and laughter they'd shared, and how she would give anything to see their smiling faces just one more time. And suddenly, like finding a life raft in the middle of a storm at sea, Bristol found the drive to push through her despair. Despite what the curse made her think and feel, the world was worth fighting for, and she was worth fighting for. There were people who cared about her, and there were people who were rooting for her. Even if she failed and died in the process, she owed it to them to keep moving. She owed it to her friends and her family to keep trying, and she owed it to herself to keep going. So Bristol kept ticking. She ignored everything her mind and body were telling her and gradually got to her feet. She slowly walked forward, focusing on one footstep at a time, and she moved toward the edge of the grave. Bristol reached up with her aching hands and grabbed 2 handfuls of dirt and began climbing. It was difficult, it was painful, and it required a strength that she didn't know she had, but Bristol did it anyway. You're wasting your time. You'll never make it out alive. Go back to sleep and return to the gray field. Let death take you to the other side. You've already lost. For the first time, Bristol decided to talk back to the voices in her head. No, you're wrong. It doesn't matter how long it takes me. It doesn't matter if I fail or I die in the process. They'll only win if I stop trying, and I'll never give up. Never. As if her response had caught her off guard, the negative thoughts went silent, and it took them a moment to return. Oh, it's time to face facts. The grave is too deep, and you are too weak. The army's too big, and you are too small. You'll never defeat them. It's impossible. I am facing facts, and if I were too weak, I wouldn't even be here. If I were too small, I wouldn't have come this far. The army may be big, and they may be strong, and they may have risen from the dead. But so have I. I've already accomplished the impossible, and I'm not done yet. Each time Bristol responded to the thoughts, it took them longer and longer to return. She was almost halfway up the dirt wall, and just a few more feet and the surface would be within her reach. Everyone hates you. The world thinks you're a murderer. No one will ever trust you again. You can't stop the army of the dead alone, but that's exactly what you are. Hated and alone. Hated and alone. Bristol placed both hands on the surface, and she grunted and gritted her teeth, and she summoned all the remaining strength she had for one final heave upward. You're wrong. Even if the world loses trust in me, even if we lose mankind's acceptance, I will never be alone. I have family family who love me, and I have friends who care about me, and they'll always be there when I need them the most. Bang! Just as Bristol's head rose above the surface, the south wall of the courtyard exploded. The blast covered the fortress in debris and knocked the Brotherhood off their feet. When the dust settled, Bristol saw Lucy standing in the midst of the damage. She was joined by the Fairy Council and the witches from Ravencrest. Bristol was so overjoyed to see her friends that she slipped off the surface and back to the bottom of the grave, and she landed with a huge smile on her face. Seeing her friends coming to her rescue validated everything she had said to her disturbing thoughts, and the negativity retreated so deep inside her that Bristol's clarity, her optimism, and her confidence returned at last. The curse hadn't been broken. She knew it was only a matter of time before the disturbing thoughts returned, but Bristol had finally learned how to fight it, not with magic, but with her mind itself. As the fairies and the witches entered the courtyard, they were shocked to see the army of the dead among the clansmen, but the Brotherhood was over 4 times the size they were expecting. Well, this was false advertised, Emeralda said. Is it just my imagination, or do most of those men look dead? Xanthos said. They sure are, Stitches said with a wide grin, and it's not even my birthday. The Brotherhood all pointed their swords, spears, and crossbows at the newcomers. They waited for the righteous king's commands. Seven climbed to the platform to get a better look at the intruders and howled with laughter. Is this supposed to be an ambush? He scoffed. Yeah, you bet it is, Lucy declared. They must not teach math at your schools? Seven sneered. There's only 9 of you, and there's over 1,000 of us. The living clansmen chuckled at their commander's remarks. Lucy scowled at him and put her hands on her hips. I'm sorry, I can't hear you over that obnoxiously loud outfit, she said. Archers, prepare to fire, Seven told his men. I'm really going to enjoy this one. You know, for such a flashy dresser, you sure are dim, Lucy said. You're not the only one with backup, buddy. Lucy whistled into the dark behind her, and the fortress started vibrating with something very big approaching. Suddenly, all the lynxes from Ravencrest Manor stampeded into the courtyard. The Brotherhood wasn't prepared for such an attack, and they didn't have time to raise their weapons before they were bitten, scratched, or tackled to the floor by these massive felines. While the lynxes clawed and pounced on the clansmen, Lucy pulled the fairies and the witches into a quick huddle. All right, so we're a little outnumbered, Lucy said. A little outnumbered? Skyline asked. We can't beat these guys on our own. Tangerina said. We don't have to beat them. We just have to save Bristol, Lucy said. You guys help the lynxes distract the Brotherhood while I look for her. And as soon as I find her, we're out of here. The fairies nodded and followed the lynxes into the battle. The witches ripped off their golden necklaces so their true appearances would help them in the fight. Bibi buzzed through the air and stung the Brotherhood with her giant stinger. All the archers fired their crossbows at her, but the witch flew so erratically that their arrows whizzed right past her. Xanthos zigzagged through the courtyard and set clansmen's robes ablaze, sending the men running towards the ocean in a panic. Skyline hit the Brotherhood with a watery geyser that erupted from her hands, and she made the ground so muddy that the clansmen slipped and slid before they could get anywhere near her. Sprout kicked off her shoes and sank her toes into the dirt. Her feet grew through the courtyard like large rooted trees and tripped the clansmen as they ran about. Once the men were off their feet, Sprout's fingers wrapped around their bodies like vines and kept them restrained. Tangerina sent her swarm through the courtyard, and the bumblebees snatched the weapons out of the Brotherhood's hands. The insects also showered the clansmen in honey, sticking their boots and bony feet to the ground. The Brotherhood's bloodstone weapons went directly through whatever magic the fairies and witches produced, but the clansmen themselves did not. Once Emeralda figured this out, she made large emerald blocks appearing throughout the courtyard. The clansmen collided with the blocks head first, and they were knocked unconscious. Pip aimed her backside at the Brotherhood and sprayed them with an odor that was so foul it burned the men's eyes and made them vomit. Oh, I forgot she was a skunk. Stitches snagged a hair off the deceased clansman's head and quickly sewed the follicle into a knitted doll. After muttering a short incantation, Stitches moved the doll's arms and legs, and the clansman mimicked the motion against his will. The witch played with the doll like it was an action figure, forcing the clansman to fight members of his own Brotherhood. Stitches was thrilled with the incantation that was finally working, and she jumped with joy. And that's why they call me Stitches, she cheered victoriously. While the lynxes and her friends battled the living and deceased clansmen, Lucy weaved through the action in search of Bristol. Her sense of trouble guided her through the courtyard like a tracking beam. With every step she took, she knew that she was getting closer and closer to her. And just when Lucy was certain that Bristol was right under her nose, she suddenly fell into an open grave and landed right beside her. Lucy! Bristol exclaimed happily. Oh, thank God, Lucy said. I was afraid we were going to be too late. The girls gave each other a tight embrace. It's so wonderful to... What happened to your hair? Bristol asked. Lucy waved it off like it wasn't important. It's a bunch of body-shaming ballerinas, and I'll tell you all about it later. She said, I'm so sorry for getting angry in the cabin. I know that you were only trying to protect me, and I never should have acted like such a jerk. I'm a horrible friend, and I hope you can forgive me. I'm sorry too, Bristol said. I haven't been acting like a good friend either. Yeah, it wasn't your fault. You were cursed. Yes, I finally figured out how to... Wait, how did you know that I was cursed? Because an invisible butler and a goat led me to a pumpkin in a witch's closet. Wow, that just sounds so crazy when you say it out loud. But the important part is that you're alive and we're friends again. Is there anything I can do to make up my horrible behavior? Actually, there is something, Bristol said. Name it. I'll do anything, Lucy said. You can help me get out of this grave. As the battle raged on above them, Seven watched his army of the dead from the safety of the platform and was exhilarated by what he saw. While the living clansmen were dropped like flies, it didn't matter what the witches, fairies, or lynxes did to the deceased clansmen. The dead always returned to their feet and kept fighting. They were resistant to Pip's fumes. They weren't bothered by Xanthos' flames, and if their foot got stuck in Tangerina's honey, they'd simply leave the foot behind and continue going. The witches and the fairies were getting tired and wouldn't last much longer. Seven was convinced he and the Brotherhood would be celebrating their first victory sooner than they expected, until he spotted something that made his blood boil. Across the courtyard, Lucy emerged from the open grave and helped Bristol climb to the surface. Even though Seven had witnessed thousands of clansmen rise from the dead earlier, seeing Bristol come back to life horrified him, and it filled the righteous king with an unfathomable fury. No! Seven seethed. That's impossible. I saw her die with my own eyes. I felt her cold flesh with my own hands. Lucy and Bristol raced through the courtyard, narrowly dodging the swords and spears and arrows that came their way. I found her, Lucy told the others. Let's get out of here. The fairies and witches were thrilled to see Bristol had survived, but slowly but surely, they pushed through the clansmen and headed for the giant hole in the south wall. Archers! Seven screamed. Stop what you're doing at once and aim your weapons at the fairy godmother. Don't let her escape. The Brotherhood immediately turned towards Bristol and pointed their crossbows at her. The fairies and witches and lynxes formed a protective circle around her, but there were hundreds and hundreds of arrows aimed directly at them, and they didn't know how they could possibly stop them all. Lucy, please tell me that you have a plan C? Bristol said, sorry. I thought the lynxes were going to be enough, Lucy admitted. Nothing's going to save you after this, Seven yelled. We're going to crush you like the vermin you are. Well, now he's just flirting with us, Stitches said. Archers, fire on 3, Seven ordered. 1, the fairies and witches searched for an escape, but they were completely surrounded. 2, with nothing to do and nowhere to go, they held one another's hands and closed their eyes and braced themselves for the end. Only a miracle could save them now. 3, their bodies tensed, expecting dozens of arrows to pierce their skin at once. However, the moment never came. I said 3, you idiots, Seven roared. The fairies and witches opened their eyes and saw that the Brotherhood were no longer focused on them. Thousands and thousands of kitchen utensils flew through the courtyard and began attacking the clansmen like a flock of rabid birds. Sharp knives sliced through the crossbows and cut the arrows in half. Pots and pans whacked the swords and spears out of their hands, and rolling pins knocked them to their feet. Who's doing this? Bibi asked. It's one of us, Sprout said. The fairies knew there was only one person who it could be, and everyone turned toward the south wall as a familiar figure stepped through the damage and joined the fight. Mrs. V, the fairies said together. Well, hey there, kiddos, Mrs. V said. Looks like you could use an extra pan. The bubbly housekeeper twirled her arms like a maestro conducting an orchestra as she assaulted the Brotherhood with her kitchen supplies. She smacked their faces with wooden spoons, she beat them over the heads with baking sheets, and she poked their eyes out with whisks and forks. Mrs. V unleashed such a powerful and ruthless attack that the fairies almost felt sorry for the clansmen. Get up and fight, Seven screamed at his army. She's just a cook. Mrs. V was horribly offended. Just a cook? She asked. Just a cook? The housekeeper pointed at the righteous king, and he was wrestled to the ground by an apron. I've seen some bad apples in my day, but that guy takes the worm. She laughed. Mrs. V, what made you come out of your room? Tangerina asked. Well, it sounds silly, but I woke up this morning and I was just tired of being afraid, the housekeeper said. I knew the only thing that would make me feel better was if I did something about my fear, and then I realized that you all were missing from the academy, and I had a feeling that you might be in trouble. So I found your stars on the map of magic, and I rushed here as fast as I could. Mrs. V, your timing is impeccable as you're cooking, Lucy declared. Well, don't just stand there like stalks of asparagus, the housekeeper said. Let's roll like citrus on a slanted counter. While the clansmen fought off the utensils, the fairies and the witches and the lynxes escaped from the fortress. They hurried down the beach to where the unicorns and the golden carriage were waiting for them. Without Mrs. V to conduct the utensils, the kitchen supplies began to drop from the air, releasing the Brotherhood from combat. Seven and the clansmen ran after the fairies and the witches, but they were too far ahead to keep up. "This isn't over, Bristol," Seven screamed. "You may have escaped this battle, but you won't escape the war. We'll repair our weapons and become even stronger than before. My army will seize the world and destroy everything and everyone you love. Mark my words, we will win, and there's nothing you can do to stop us." But before Bristol joined her friends inside the car, she turned back to the fortress and took one last look at Seven. She had every right to detest him. She had every reason to hate him. But as she watched his eyes bold with rage and foam at the mouth with fury, all Bristol felt was pity for the righteous king. "People like you will never win," she said. "Hate is its own punishment." The golden carriage raced back to the fairy territory with all the fairies safely aboard. The witches flew beside the carriage on their broomsticks, and the lynxes followed on foot. By the time they reached the border and crossed through the hedge barrier, the sun had started to rise. All the fairies and the magical creatures were still sound asleep, and the academy grounds were eerily quiet compared to the fortress. As the fairy climbed out of the carriage, the witches dismounted their broomsticks, and everyone was visibly shaken from battle. Bristol, on the other hand, took advantage of her newfound clarity and immediately planned their next move. "Okay, we've got a lot of work ahead of us," she told the others. "First things first, Esmeralda, I want you to surround the new territory with an emerald wall, and Xanthos, I want you to surround her wall with a wall of fire. The Brotherhood's weapons may penetrate our magic, but I won't let them set foot into our territory. Tangerina, I need you to send unicorns to the Evergreen House and retrieve my family at once. They will not be safe in the Southern Kingdom. Skyline, I want you to write King White, Queen, and... Excuse me. Skyline, I want you to write to King White, Queen Industria, and King Wordsworth and tell them Prince Gallivant killed King Champion the 14th and has plans to take over the world with an army of dead soldiers. Don't sugarcoat it, okay? They need to be prepared." And Lucy was shocked to hear Bristol say her name. "You want me to do something?" she asked. "Absolutely. Consider yourself back on the Fairy Council," Bristol said. "The Southern Kingdom has been told that I killed King Champion the 14th and that I raised an army from the dead. I want you to create a pamphlet that tells them the truth. Show all your business skills and use everything you know to make it as compelling and captivating and entertaining as possible. And drop them all over Chariot Hills. Don't stop until every street is covered." "Aye, aye, Captain," Lucy said with a salute. Bristol was practically cheerful as she gave the instructions. The fairy stared at her like she was a different person. "What's wrong?" she said. "Nothing. That's what's wrong," Esmeralda said. "You're acting normal again." "It's good to have you back," Xanthos said. "Yeah, it's good to be back." Even though they had a solid plan in place, now none of the fairies or witches leapt into action. All they could think about was the battle that they had barely escaped from. They gazed at the border with fearful eyes, knowing that they could cross paths with the Brotherhood sooner rather than later. "I'm really scared," Skyline said. Is it okay for me to admit that?" "Yeah, me too," Tangerina said. "We've never faced anything like this before." "I'm not gonna lie to you," Bristol told them. "We're up against some pretty scary and unprecedented times. The world isn't as safe as it used to be, and it may seem like we've lost something, but you have something to lose and to learn the most important lessons. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that no one is ever alone or powerless as they feel. We can always find someone or something to help us if we're willing to change our perspective. The Brotherhood may seem unbeatable and they might seem frightening, but their greatest weapon isn't their soldiers or their bloodstone. Their greatest weapon is fear. They want us to believe that they're impossible to beat. They want us to think we aren't strong enough to face them. But as long as we don't confuse our fears with facts, then we can and we will defeat them. The truth is we also have a secret weapon, and it's more powerful than the Brotherhood ever will be. But first, I had to lose it to realize just how valuable it is." "Yeah, what is it?" Lucy asked. Bristol smiled at her friends. "It's hope," she said. "I don't know about you, but I'm tired of letting people use my emotions to control me. So from now on, we're going to starve whatever misery they try to cause us. We're going to fight sadness with laughter. We're going to fight loneliness with friendship. And we're going to fight anger with gratitude. We're going to fight fear with hope. Because as long as we keep fighting and as long as we keep our hope alive, the Brotherhood won't stand a chance." The end. Book 2. Done. So Monday we start book 3, as promised. Book 3 is called A Tale of Sorcery. And I guess it has to do with them trying to find the curse, right? One would assume. One would assume. So, yeah. Harsh. Well, she didn't beat death. She made a deal with that. That didn't really try to beat her, which I guess is good. Crazy. Yes, very. It's a cliffhanger, but not a cliffhanger. Like it was a good ending. We know that there's a fight coming. We know that there's a war brewing. Kind of like book 5 and 6 in the other series. Like we knew it was going to end on a cliffhanger. Yeah, a glimpse of hope is nice. It is nice, and it's nice that Bristol's back to normal. And yeah, but who is the immortal one? Like for a fleeting second, I was like, is it Madame Weatherbury? But then I was like, no. I don't know. Who could the immortal one be? I'm trying to think of everyone we know. How is Stitches creepy and cute? I know. I actually love Stitches, you guys. I think she's hilarious. Like, I would have a doll of her. I think she's great. You think Pip is the immortal one? But wouldn't Mistress Mara have recognized her? I don't know. I feel like she's too young to be the immortal one. It's someone who has to have lived for a long time. The only thing I could think was Madame Weatherbury, but I don't think it's her either because of the whole thing that happened with what's his name? Horace. I thought it was cute how Connor and Alex and their dad had a tree. Their dad had a tree, his brother had a tree, Esmea had a tree. Yeah. Well, almost. They're going to be planted soon. They're not born yet. It's very cute. Have you guys ever seen the movie The Bluebird? I know, the little witches are so funny. I love... This is kind of similar, sort of, not really, similar to how the play and the movie The Bluebird show before birth, like show souls before. It's very sweet. I wonder if Chris ever saw that movie or read the play or anything. Anyway, we did it. We finished book 2. We will start book 3 Monday. And that's the whole kit and caboodle. I love you guys. I will see you later for Tale of Sorcery. Oh, in case you guys aren't on Patreon or didn't see the message, I have been fighting nonstop with YouTube to get the other things up. It's doing this weird thing where even if I choose upload as a video, it's uploading it as a short, so it's only uploading 1 minute of each of the episodes, which makes no sense. Like, I don't know why it's doing that. Like, I'm filling everything out like video and uploading a 30, 40, 50-minute video, and it's doing this weird thing with all of them, so I have to I deleted all those 1 minute ones to start fresh and try to figure it out. I'll figure that out today. It really does, Naisa. I don't understand why it does this. It makes no sense. There's no logic to it at all. But I will see you all later, and I hope you have a great rest of your weekend. And we'll see you. Are you doing a slime live later? I don't know. Bye, guys.